Hi, Penny. So good to see you today. How are you?
I'm amazing. How about you?
I just realized that it's so good to see you. People will not see us. So good
I
to hear you.
know. But we see each other when we do this, so it's true. It's true.
We are on the one before last episode of this season's podcast, and I have a pretty big thing that I want to bring to the conversation.
Okay.
And I'd like to talk. I think it fits really, really well with what we've talked about before. I want to talk about emotions and grief and our perception of death, and how does that, tie in with our boundaries and how we experience this or how we share this with others. So let's just start with emotions. What's your where do you want to start with this?
Wow.
No pressure.
I want to say I really think this is an important topic and an interesting one. The thing is, we don't talk about death enough, and we don't talk about it with our loved ones enough. And I think there would be so much healing in that, and there would be a better management of emotions when that time comes, because that time will come to us all. And we have to recognize that. We have to, one thing's for sure in life, death and taxes. And so I think it's really important that this topic is discussed amongst friends, amongst family. And something that's occurred to me is I've got a couple of people that that do funerals, and interestingly enough, I'm studying to be an officiant at the moment, which is somebody who can do spiritualist funerals, weddings, namings. No bar mitzvahs in there. That's a different religion. And so I am studying this, and it's brought grief and grieving to the forefront of my mind. And as a medium, I obviously come across people that are in a grief process and a healing process. And so I'm also looking at grief and what that means. And ultimately, I think if we start to think about grief as a healing, then we might view it as a more positive aspect. Now, that does not take away your feeling of loss. I'm not trying to say that people need to just get over it. I'm definitely not saying that, because certainly the way every individual person grieves and goes through that emotion of grief is different, and that's okay, and it should be okay. However, it can also be a healing. And I think if we talk about it beforehand, then it's not as much of a shock. And perhaps it gives us some comfort in knowing how our loved one felt, what they would have wanted, etc., instead of going through grief and discovering what they wanted, or discovering that they never said what they wanted when it came to a funeral, or anything like that. So there's so many emotions that come around just even the process of, and the emotions of grief. And I really feel that if we talked more about it in the prelude, it might just help people to move through that process a little bit more. So, for example, I don't want to die anytime tomorrow, or anytime soon, because as human beings, we're built to want to live. There's something in us that wants to carry on, that wants to live and let live, and travel, which we can't do at the moment, and all those wonderful things. So it's not something I'm wishing upon myself right now, but I would want my friends to know that I'm not afraid. To me, it will be just it's like getting a plane and going to the other side of the world. It's not that I'm gone, I'm just in a different place. And obviously, I did move to the other side of the world, and I left friends and family behind in Australia to come to England. And I think for one of my best friends in the whole wide world and universe, she probably has gone through a grieving process, because I'm not there every day. We saw each other every day. We spoke every day. We did so much together. And don't forget, that was a bit of a grieving for me too, because I was leaving everything and everyone behind, and going into the unknown. So I think that helps me to see death and my crossing to the other side as like getting a plane ride, and it's leaving this world behind, and I'm in another world, but I'm not gone forever. I'm just in a different place. And for those that do go to mediums, and good mediums, will know that a lot of healing can come from that connection with a loved one who has gone to that next place. Some people need that healing through counseling or other things. Now, I might be preempting a question of yours, Andrea, because I can feel it there. But as a medium as well, working as a medium, we are dealing with a lot of emotions. We're dealing with the emotions of the spirit world. We're dealing with the emotions of the sitter, and we're an emotional sandwich in the middle. And so it's not ours to, we need to convey emotions, but it's not ours to fall apart in the middle of what should be a healing session. And so balancing all of those emotions means that we as mediums also need to take time out to balance ourselves, and to get a little bit of time and space to kind of decompress, if you like, from being in that emotional sandwich. So I think that I've been fortunate to witness how, in some cases, the communication and that connection and that communion between the spirit world, or the loved one who has passed on, and the recipient, the relative, the loved one, you can almost see energetically and feel and witness a wonderful upliftment and healing process in taking place. And it does take time after that moment, but it's, as somebody who is very emotional and empathetic, you can't help but feel for people in those moments, but it can be a joyful thing. And I think what happens is we tend to think of death as something as dark and mysterious and final, and it almost seems to take on a grey cloud, you know. Whereas if we view it as another chapter, a book, a series of books, we've finished a book. It's not just a chapter, we've finished a book, and we're starting the next series. We're starting not just a new chapter, but we're starting a new book, a new extension of life. Then it takes on a slightly different and more uplifting and positive aspect, I think.
So much to unpack in what you just said.
I could see you processing a lot there, and I could feel you processing a lot there. And I know it's a tough and deep topic.
We've definitely talked about this in the past. And for those of you wondering, my father died almost a decade ago, and I have been having lots of interesting conversations with Penny about this whole process around death and grieving. And perhaps that, this conversation actually led to us recording some of these things we're talking about today with you. So I want to unpack that a bit and unthread it, because I feel that we might fear death because it seems so definitive.
Yeah.
And it seems so, you mentioned it might feel like an end, but it's not quite like that. Yeah. And I wonder, how could we reframe this ending as a beginning, even if it's not perhaps a beginning necessarily for us? There's something more here that I feel we should be mindful of. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the true message of spiritualism is that death is not the end. And it was through my journey through spiritualism that I truly came to understand this. And you're sort of asking to unpack and unthread this whole thing, and that is what that's what true spiritualism is. And unfortunately, most people put a lot of things into the topic of spiritualism that don't belong there. And so there's a real misconception and understanding out there where people sort of think it's full of deep, dark, mysterious, paranormal, possessed people, and it's absolutely nothing like that at all. In fact, you don't need to be a medium to be a spiritualist. You can be a spiritualist because it's teachings that help you, or philosophies, teachings that help you to understand about life in the physical and life in the etheric, life in the spirit, that continuation of the soul, and that we are more than the flesh and bone that we feel and see in a mirror and experience with somebody else. We have a consciousness and we have a soul, and you know, something that really helped me to understand about the soul and the spirit and the mind is on my website, but I just want to say it now, and that is, the soul is the compass that guides the spirit through life. The spirit is the record keeper of the soul's journey, and the mind is the magnet that tries to throw the compass off course. And effectively, what this is saying is that the soul, to me, the soul power is infinite, indestructible. It is who we truly are. And I read in a wonderful old spiritualist book that the soul body is more real than the physical body. But in this world, we're led to think and believe that the physical body is more real than anything else, and that the physical world is more real than anything else. And look, if this doesn't resonate with anyone, that's absolutely fine. I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm not here to change anybody's thoughts that don't want to be changed. However, in my own experience, in my own evidence, in my own understanding, I've come to realize that it is true that the soul body is more real than the physical, because it transcends death. It you know, we see death as this final outcome, that it's the end, it's dark, it's gone, it's blank. Well, what would be the point of life then if there was nothing? And the message of spiritualism is to say that there is no end, that there is a continuation in another form, and for the most part, it's beyond a lot of it is beyond our comprehension, because we can't think outside of the physical and what we can tangibly see, feel, experience. However, a lot of people have spontaneous spiritual experiences through their life, which help them to recognize that there is something beyond the physical. And that's what you've got to hold on to. That's what you've got to accept. And when we're born into this world at, you know, so many hours old, do we understand this conversation we're having now? No. So, we've got to expect that when death is a rebirth. Think of a phoenix. Think of things that help you think about rebirth, and uh, a bend in the road, a change, an aeroplane ride across the other side of the world from one landmass to another. It's a change, and that's what it is. It's a change, not a finality.
Let's touch a bit on rituals of readiness. And how do we get not necessarily our bodies, but our minds ready for this, both from the perspective of somebody who might experience this, and also from the perspective of those close to that individual. And things that come to my mind are, preparation, forgiveness, acceptance, that I think happen both before and after.
Yeah.
So let's chat a bit about this.
Well, we talk about trying to keep these podcasts short, but they always end up being quite long. I blame you. So, so look, I think that's actually really important, and that's why I was saying I think we need to talk about it more with our friends and our family, and sort of say whether we're afraid or not, and as I've said to anyone who hears this, I'm not afraid to die. I don't necessarily want it to happen straight away, but I have a lot of comfort in knowing that it is a change of circumstance. And so that is my acceptance, that is my understanding. And maybe in saying that out loud to my friends and family, is a way in which they can feel better about how I feel about it. Because I think a lot of the time, look, I think a lot of it also goes back to, we don't forgive each other, we have arguments, we fall out, we have disagreements, we don't resolve them. All these things lead to a lack of forgiveness of self and a lack of forgiveness for others. And the more that we do in this life to attempt to repair that and move into the acceptance, I've genuinely done everything I can to try to apologize or try to send to receive an apology, and I've done everything I can, then you can move into an acceptance, and it's left with somebody else. Sorry, I didn't know my phone would ring right in the middle.
Let's take that as an intervention to bring the conversation to what if this takes us by surprise?
Yeah, I think that's the worst kind. And I think that there are a lot of people who, it's harder for children that lose a parent or parents that lose children. I really feel for people in those cases, especially parents who lose children, because we think of life as the adults go before the children. And that goes into a whole new world and realm. However, I think that when we realize, or when we can accept that there's a continuation, it brings a lot, it helps us to move into that acceptance quicker than if we don't ever think about it, if we don't ever talk about it, if we don't ever understand that we are infinite, that we are indestructible. That's what helps us to recognize that we don't want those things to happen, but we can perhaps start to be on that journey of acceptance a little less fractured and with slightly more peace than if we didn't have those feelings and understandings. So it's, roses don't grow without manure. And that's kind of a good philosophy in life. You don't get good without something to make you stronger or to grow through more beautiful. And it doesn't mean to say there's not going to be difficulties and grey days as much as sunny days and so on and so forth, but we need all of that to grow as a soul, to grow as a person, to grow in life.
That's a beautiful segue into my next question, which is, could we see death as an opportunity, at least for those who stay?
Absolutely. I think that I'm always in wonder and amazement about how perhaps people who are skeptical and they pass on and their little girl goes to a medium for a reading, or their son, and they never told, it could be many different circumstances, and they come forward and say, I never believed in all this woo-woo, but I'm here for you because of my love for you, and I wished I had told you I loved you. I wished I had told you how proud I am of you. And in some cases they say, you told me about there being an afterlife and I thought you were bonkers, but I'm here because you need me to be here and I want to be here for you, and it's amazing. And so I love the honesty of the spirit world as well. We don't die and become all-knowing angels that find car parking spaces for people. I'm sorry. That's pretty much a fact.
No.
But what's beautiful is we still have our humor, we still have our memories, we still have our love and our personality, and that's and therefore we still have our growth, and part of that is being able to apologize across the divide.
Well, Penny, I feel we've taken quite a heavy duty type of subject and had not a light but a lightful conversation about it. And I'm just wondering, how could we end so that we end with hope?
Well, I would say that I've come across lots of different little sayings by spiritualists, like death is but a bend in the road, and they've always given me pause for thought. But I kind of like my analogy today that came to me, which is it's like jumping on an aeroplane and going to another country across the other side of the world. It's just that. It's like crossing a river. It's like getting on an aeroplane and going to a new land. And when we think about it like that, it's not that we're gone. It's just that we're in a different place.
Thank you, Penny.